Have you ever heard of devastating aerial offensives? What Russia unleashed against Ukraine in the last few hours goes beyond any limit seen so far in this war. It was a calculated move to cause shock and fear, mixing hundreds of kamikaze drones, ballistic projectiles and cruise missiles launched almost simultaneously, in a brutal attempt to paralyze an entire country in just one night. There were 579 Shahed drones, released in successive waves, combined with Kh-101 cruise missiles fired by strategic bombers and high-speed Iskander ballistic projectiles, even some of North Korean design. It was as if Putin had decided to press every button of destruction at once, aiming not only at military targets, but also at the energy grid, civilian buildings, and strategic urban centers. And why is this offensive different from all the previous ones? Because it is not just about damaging physical structures. This is psychological warfare. The Kremlin wants to force Ukrainians to relive the trauma of the winters of 2022 and 2023, when entire cities were plunged into darkness, without power, without heating, without water. It is a strategy designed to break not only infrastructure, but also the emotional resistance of a people already exhausted by years of conflict. Ukraine's air defense did what it could. It managed to intercept 552 of the 579 drones, an impressive number that shows the efficiency of its systems, but also reveals the Russian plan: flood the airspace with so many targets that something will always get through. And what does get through strikes energy plants, logistics hubs, and residential buildings. This is the scenario we are going to analyze in this video. The largest aerial offensive of the war, what it means for Ukraine, how it places NATO in front of a dilemma, and what could change in the course of the conflict. Before we continue, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our analyses. Here you get what mainstream outlets don't show, with depth and without filters. To understand the scale of this offensive, we need to break down every part of the plan. Russia did not act improvisationally. On the contrary, this was a meticulously calculated operation designed to overload air defenses and test the limits of the Ukrainian system. First came the Shahed drones of Iranian design. They are slow, noisy, easy to detect, but when launched in absurd numbers, they become a weapon of saturation. Imagine 579 of these machines advancing in continuous waves, like an endless swarm over the skies of Ukraine. The objective was not only to cause destruction, but also to exhaust anti-air batteries, force soldiers to remain on high alert for hours, and open the way for more lethal weapons. While the drones were flying, Kh-101 cruise missiles were launched from strategic bombers. These are long-range, precise and deadly weapons, programmed to hit power stations, ammunition depots and logistical hubs. The target was not just military, it was also the daily life of the population, the energy that powers hospitals, schools and homes. And at the peak of the offensive, Russia launched Iskander-M and Kn-23 ballistic projectiles. Unlike drones, these are not slow, not easy to intercept. They are high-speed, capable of altering their trajectory mid-flight, designed to pierce defenses and strike vital points. It was a layered strategy: drones to saturate, cruise missiles to damage infrastructure, ballistic projectiles to finish what remained standing. The result was devastating. Despite Ukraine's air defenses intercepting most drones, dozens of projectiles still reached their targets. In Dnipro, a residential building was hit, leaving civilian casualties. In the south, regions like Odessa and Mykolaiv once again faced blackouts. Kyiv suffered new power cuts, reviving the fear of long winters in darkness. This was not just another episode of the war, it was a direct message from Moscow to the West. We have the resources to escalate at any moment. You may defend, but you can never fully stop us. It is the translation of a strategy that mixes physical destruction with psychological terror. Why did Putin decide to launch the largest aerial offensive of the war right now? The answer lies not only on the battlefield, but also on the international political stage. This operation was no coincidence. It was synchronized to occur just days before the meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the United Nations General Assembly. Putin knows that every high-level meeting is an opportunity for pressure. The massive strike works as a warning, to show Ukraine that resistance is futile, and to make clear to the United States that the cost of supporting Kyiv keeps rising. Sources close to the Kremlin, cited by international analysts, reveal that Moscow believes Trump is not willing to maintain large-scale military support. The Russian view is simple. The American president would prefer to settle the war quickly, even if that means pushing Kiev into an unfavorable deal. Putin acts on that reading, striking at the moment when Ukraine is preparing to ask for more aid. There is also an internal psychological factor. For the Russian population, Putin needs to project strength. The Kremlin's narrative has always been that the special operation is under control and that Russia dictates the pace of the conflict. Launching hundreds of drones and missiles at once reinforces the image of power and inevitability of victory, feeding nationalism and diverting attention from economic problems inside the country. And for Europe, the message is even harsher. The offensive coincided with massive cyber disruptions in airports like Heathrow, Berlin, and Brussels, a reminder that Russia can affect not only Ukraine, but the very core of European infrastructure. It is hybrid warfare in its clearest form, combining military destruction with digital and psychological chaos. Putin is not only waging war against Ukraine, he is testing NATO's limits, probing how far Europeans and Americans are willing to go. The largest aerial offensive of the war, therefore, is more than a military move. It is a geopolitical maneuver, calculated to reshape negotiations, weaken alliances, and place Moscow back at the center of the board. If Ukraine feels the direct weight of the projectiles, NATO feels the strategic pressure. Every missile that falls on Kiev or Odessa is also a test for Europe's defenses. The message is clear. If Moscow can launch nearly 600 drones in a single day against Ukraine, what would prevent it from repeating such a scenario against NATO neighbors? The episode already triggered immediate responses. Poland placed its aircraft on high alert. Germany and Sweden sent fighter jets to intercept Russian planes over the Baltic, and in Estonia, 3 MiG-31s were caught violating its airspace, forcing NATO to respond. This is no longer a distant conflict. The war is knocking on Europe's door. This type of offensive places NATO before a dilemma. How far is the West willing to go to sustain Kiev? If it responds with more military support, it risks direct escalation with Russia. If it hesitates, it risks projecting weakness, exactly what Putin wants to exploit. It is a game of deterrence and patience, where a single miscalculation could change the course of history. The largest aerial offensive of the war is not just a military episode. It is a warning about the future of European security. Putin has shown that he still holds powerful cards and does not hesitate to use them. And before we continue, leave your comment here. Do you think NATO should react more firmly against Moscow or avoid direct confrontation at all costs? Your opinion is essential in this debate. In Ukraine, the offensive left immediate and profound scars. In cities like Dnipro, Kharkiv, and Odessa, explosions struck residential buildings, energy plants, and logistical hubs. The result: new blackouts, lack of heating, and a growing sense of vulnerability. Entire families spent the night in underground shelters, listening to the buzzing of drones and sirens that never stopped. The psychological impact is as devastating as the physical one. Each wave of drones reinforces the idea that the danger is endless, that no rest is possible. Many Ukrainians describe this routine as living in a cycle of terror, where the sound of an engine in the sky can mean death. It is a war that attacks both the material resistance and the emotional resilience of a nation. Even with the impressive interception rate, more than 90% of drones were taken down, Moscow's message was delivered. A single projectile slipping through is enough to cause death's destruction and despair, and each new blackout rekindles the memory of past winters, when millions were left without light and heat for weeks. Putin knows that breaking the morale of civilians is as important as hitting military targets, and that is why, by targeting power plants and residential areas, the Kremlin seeks to convince Ukrainians that resistance is futile. But so far, the response has been the opposite. Despite the suffering, anger toward Moscow grows, and so does the determination to fight. On the international stage, the largest aerial offensive of the war was not just a military move, it was a calculated diplomatic strike. Putin knew the whole world would be watching and launched his operation precisely as Zelenskyy was preparing for crucial meetings with Western leaders, including Donald Trump. The effect is double. For Ukraine, the offensive highlights the urgency of greater support. Zelenskyy arrives at the UN not as a president merely asking for aid, but as a leader surrounded by chaos, trying to prove his country still resists despite overwhelming odds. For Putin, this is a chess move. The more desperate Ukraine appears, the greater the pressure on allies to negotiate under Moscow's terms. For the United States, the offensive puts Trump in a difficult position. His administration has insisted on a transactional approach, focused on solving fast. But faced with images of ruined cities, public pressure could rise. Moscow bets that Trump will avoid escalation and instead push for a deal that allows the US to refocus on China. In Europe, the situation is even more delicate. The offensive reinforced the perception that the conflict is not contained within Ukraine. It threatens the entire region. Countries like Poland, Estonia, and Germany are calling for a firmer response, while others still hesitate to expand involvement. The result is a divided West, exactly the scenario the Kremlin hopes to exploit. The largest aerial offensive of the war is not an isolated episode. It is a sign of where the world may be headed. If Russia is capable of launching nearly 600 drones in a single day, what would stop it from repeating such an escalation, perhaps on an even larger scale? Ukraine resists, but each massive strike shows that this conflict is no longer local. It already threatens Europe's energy security, the stability of Western alliances, and even the psychological balance of populations. What is at stake is not just the future of Kyiv, but the future of the international order. Putin is betting on Western fatigue, Allied division, and the ability to use fear as a weapon. Ukraine, on the other hand, is betting on resilience and the hope of not being abandoned. Between these two poles lies a world increasingly unstable, where hybrid warfare mixes drones, missiles, cyber disruption, and propaganda to redraw borders and weaken democracies. The strike of 579 drones and missiles was not just a military test, it was a global message. A warning that the conflict could escalate at any moment, and that no alliance is free from pressure. And now I want to hear from you. Should NATO harden its stance against Moscow, even at the risk of direct confrontation, or push for a deal before escalation gets out of control? Leave your opinion in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and share this video so more people can understand the gravity of what is happening.